Hello, everyone. Happy Earth Day and welcome to the Amplify series. My name is Perone Yousafzadeh. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am Jiva Theater Center's Associate Artistic Director and Director of Engagement. For accessibility, I'll describe myself. I'm a Middle Eastern woman with olive skin, dark brown eyes, and wavy dark brown hair that comes to my chin. I'm wearing a denim shirt with a brown blazer, clear glasses, and hoop earrings, and I'm sitting in front of a black upright piano. I'm zooming in from the ancestral and unceded land of the Onondaga, or the people of the Great Hill, colonially known as Rochester, New York. I want to take a moment to pay respect and give thanks to their elders past and present who have stewarded this land for generations, and to acknowledge the additional environmental impact and carbon footprint created by the technologies and structures we are using to gather here virtually tonight. If you would like to acknowledge the native land where you reside, feel free to do so in the chat. And if you're not sure, you can use the resource that I'm popping in here momentarily to find out. There you are. We are in meeting mode tonight so that we can use closed captioning provided by rev.com. To be transparent, this is in light of issues that were brought to our attention by last night's incredible panelists. And I would like to welcome Jiva's artistic director, Mark Cuddy, onto the screen to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Cuddy. I use the pronouns he, him, his, and I am the artistic director and co-CEO of Jiva Theater Center. I want to take this moment to apologize on behalf of Jiva for the lack of captioning for last night's Amplified series panel discussion. I also deeply want to thank the panelists and attendees from last night who have held us accountable for this harm. I acknowledge that we need to do better, starting with me. Tonight and going forward, these events will be captioned, and I thank you for participating in these important community conversations by attending the Amplified series. Thank you, Perone.
Thank you, Mark. Just a couple things about meeting mode. So since we're here using this for the purposes of closed captioning, I'll just humbly ask that if you are not one of tonight's panelists, that you keep your video off so that we can maintain our focus on the panelists who are sharing their expertise and perspectives with us this evening. I will also ask humbly that you try to keep your mute on your microphone as well, but please use the chat to lift up something you heard that you loved, to show all kinds of affirmation and support, and also to share your questions, as there will be some time for question and answer in the last 15 minutes or so of our time together. Just so that you can help me flag it, if you wouldn't mind putting question in all caps before you type your question in the chat, that will help me manage what I'm sure will be a very lively chat this evening. Thank you so much. All of us at Jiva were so inspired by the RMSC's Changemakers exhibit, which you still have time to check out before it closes on May 16th. This exhibit is a beautiful reminder of the incredible richness and history of activism and advocacy here in Rochester, and the fact that our changemakers are not just part of our past, they are a vital part of our present. So we created Tenacious Women, shaping change in Rochester and beyond, to further celebrate and uplift these stories. We've commissioned 20 professional playwrights here in Rochester and across the country to tell the changemakers' stories. And we are also having 5 young writers working with 5 living changemakers in creating new works about their lives and their impact. And tonight, we're honored to host 3 living changemakers and our wonderful moderator in a conversation about climate justice. And now I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists. You can read their incredible full-length bios on our website, which I'll pop in the chat for you momentarily. Kristen R. Walker is an avid reader, grassroots organizer, and a student of Black feminism. A graduate from Franklin High School, Monroe Community College, and the College of Rockport, Kristen uses an intersectional lens to examine the root causes of social and educational issues. Kristen is currently the young adult minister at Spiritus Christi Church and the co-founder of Flower City Noire Collective, and facilitates a seasonal book club where they read the texts of Black women, trans, cis, non-binary, and gender non-conforming across the diaspora. Welcome, Kristen. Tonya Noel Stevens is the co-founder of Flower City Noire Collective and focuses on creating an intergenerational garden-based healing space in the community she serves. As a community activist, Tonya has worked on social justice campaigns that have shaped our current political scene, including organizing with Black, building leadership and community knowledge, the Movement for Black Lives, Fight for 15, and currently Rochester's citywide tenants union and environmental justice movement. Since founding the urban farm Cause and FX Green Space, Tonya has been feeding and planting seeds of change in the community. Welcome, Tonya. Chandra Maracle was born and raised on the west side of Buffalo and is the mother of 4 daughters. She studied at SUNY Cortland College, University at Buffalo, New York, and University of Salamanca, Spain. Chandra is co-founder and nutrition motivator of the Everlasting Tree School, and she was a collaborator on the Healthy Roots Committee at Six Nations and developed the Haudenosaunee Food Guide for the Community Challenge. Chandra is founder of Real People Eat Real Food, exploring links between people, food, mothering, homemaking, art, language, technology, and land. She is currently a PhD student at York University in the Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change, and she lives on Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. Welcome, Chandra, glad you're here. And finally, Dr. Kathryn A. Mariner is the Wilmot Assistant Professor of Anthropology and Visual and Cultural Studies at the University of Rochester, where she teaches courses on race, kinship, and urban space. As a cultural anthropologist and clinical social worker, Kathryn examines the relationship between social inequality and intimacy in the post-industrial urban United States. She is the author of Contingent Kinship, The Flows and Futures of Adoption in the United States, and her work has appeared in several academic journals, including American Anthropologist, Public Culture, and Cultural Anthropology. Her current research explores the relationship between race and placemaking in Rochester, New York. I'm going to let you all take it away from here. I'll be hanging out in the back, listening and learning. Thank you all so much for being here and enjoy the Amplify series.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Perone. And thank you to everyone for organizing and our guests for being here and everyone to come and participate in this conversation. So I'm Kate Mariner. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I teach anthropology at the University of Rochester. I'm a brown-skinned, Black-identifying femme person in a gray sweater with gold hoop earrings and a shaved head, or it was recently shaved. The first thing I kind of want to do is just ask each of our speakers to tell us a little bit about the work that they've been doing, embellish on their sort of introductions. And I think particularly Chandra wanted to start us off with an opening statement.
Greetings to all of you. My name is Chandra Maracle. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I have fluffy hair and I am aging and I can't see very well without my reading glasses, so I'm wearing those. And I have a black tank top underneath a gray sweater. And I am Ganyak Kehaga from Gontege. My father's parents were from the Mohawk community of Gontege or Tyndonega. And I am Sicilian American and German American from the west side of Buffalo on my mother's side. I'd like to say a few words in Ganyak as part of a Haudenosaunee protocol. So I'd like to say these few words of what is sometimes known as the Thanksgiving address, but very, very briefly. So ona skatning and didawakwe nuni ne ngwa ni guna tahno dayetino porlado e guega na hodans no gia punjade titkalum hiade Dahno isinakalum hadi, medisego yung kiatagen has. Dahno oni de chiduanu blado ne swayelizo, dahno gat that sansalasa uyerno. So I just wanted to say very briefly to take a moment to bring all of our minds together as one and send our greetings and our thankfulness and our love and our respect to all of the things on the earth, all of the things in the sky, and all of the things on the other side of the sky that we cannot see, that still continue to do their duties and responsibilities for us so that we may live healthy and happily as human beings here on the earth. And also I acknowledge the strength and the force of nature as well. And I'd also like to say that as according to Haudenosaunee protocol as well, I will say a few words of acknowledgement and what we sometimes call condolence, and that we are all facing interesting times right now for sure. So regardless of where we're living and what we're doing in our lives, we're all facing some things, and often accompanying that is grief. So I'd like you to just imagine that I'm wiping away any tears that may be in your eyes with a soft doe skin, that I'm clearing out your ears with a soft feather, and that I'm giving you a cool drink of water to soothe your throat for any grief you may be carrying, which may be preventing you from expressing yourself. So with all of that, thank you. Those are my words for now.
Thank you so much, Chandra. So maybe I'll have Tonya and Chris say a little bit more about yourselves and your commitment to environmental justice work, and then circle back around to Chandra. Oh, you're muted, Tonya.
Hey, I'm Tonya Noel, co-founder of City Noire Collective, self-described planeteer. I've been an environmental justice person, advocate for the earth my whole life, because we live here, because I'm a part of this planet, and because I want to nourish it as it nourishes me. I want to continue to grow and be a part of it. We've been doing this work for about 6 years now, which seems like a super long time. And I'm so grateful to be in this space with you all, and to be able to talk about it and talk about the work that's coming up and the work we can do together to see some change in our local environment and climate as a whole. Yeah.
Chris?
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm just dealing with like a little cold or something, so forgive me if I'm a little stuffy. Send me good vibes and healing vibes. I'm a brown skin person with shaved sides and a bun on top of my head, and I'm wearing a blue sweatshirt that's like V-neck zipper like. And I'm just serving face, y'all. That's it. I don't really got nothing else. So my elaboration on my bio, I was like, oh, who is that? And then currently we talked a little bit about the book club that I run to do consciousness raising efforts, specifically around Black feminism. And that's turning into an actual bookstore. And so that's what I've been working on right now. And part of that is having used books so that one, we're not burning books. We never do that. But then two, they're recycled and keep going. And I've also been, as a child of the 90s, you know, a planet person. And like one of my earliest books is from like 2008. That was a green book of like things to do to go green. And I successfully said that I've checked a lot of those boxes. So
Amazing. Books for the planet. I love this. Tonya,
I forgot to describe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm also a brown skin person. I have on a black hoodie. I have shaved sides as well and curly locks on top. Purple wall. It's one of my favorite shades of purple also. So it's really giving you great deep plum vibes. And just expand on the bio. I'm a 2018 Selfcare farm farmer, Black farmer immersion alum. that I'm in. We're in our 6th growing year here in Rochester, between the Cause and Effects Garden on Flint, which we'll be back at. So that's our original garden space. So I'm super excited about that. And our growing space, our Jeff Sun Garden. It's a sunflower garden, which the groundhogs eat most of the sunflowers. So, they haven't bloomed yet, but we're going to try it again this year. And that's on Jefferson and Brown. So I'm super excited to be going into this growing season. And just, that was just the only thing I wanted to add, expand on the work we've been doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Tonya, Noel. Chandra, did you want to add anything just for people to know about your work before we sort of get into the meatier questions?
Oh, well, I guess I'll add that unlike Chris, I am a child of the 70s. So I don't think we were really raised with as much of an environmental consciousness, perhaps those in the 90s. In fact, I was just talking to my mother yesterday about how I do food work now a lot as related to environmental justice. And food in the 70s was not about environmental justice. Food was about consumerism and whatever came in a box, in a bag, in a can. So it was in my young adult life that I really chose to do this work around food, or rather it chose me. So this idea I said of gahwa umwe is kind of an idea of original foods in Ganyakeha in the Mohawk language. Exploring these links, these intersectionalities is the new buzzword between food and just about everything. But I primarily look at things like art and language and land. And for me, certainly mothering and homemaking and children and how all of that ties together.
Yeah,
so that's a lot about who I am right now.
Amazing. So what I want to kind of start with for you all is what has been inspiring to you in this work around climate justice? What are you reading? What are you listening to or watching or doing or experiencing that's really sort of fueling your work?
I'll go first. For me, my go-to is there's this Assata Shakur poem, Revolution is Love. And it's one of my favorites because in it she talks about loving the planet and loving the people and loving the children, loving the plants and all of those things. And it's like, I really came to this work kind of at the intersection. Like I was doing on the ground organizing. It was like, I couldn't yell anymore. How can we like organize and get people involved and continue to like move the issue, but also heal and rest and grow, and move and have space to like sit and talk and think. And so that's where we came to gardening at. So it really keeps me inspired and keeps me like grounded in like both parts, like the movement and motivation of we're on the ground and we need to make immediate change, and the centeredness of we just need to watch some things grow. We need to have some peace, and take time to again heal, and learn. So that's really one of my main things that keeps me going. It's literally one of my favorite quotes, or poems. And then I'll also say like just growing things. So just seeing seeds go from seed to plant and be able to eat the things that you actually grown, and to grow it on Jefferson Avenue, to grow it in the hood, to grow it with these youth who haven't seen these things grow before. It really like gives you so much joy. Or to even watch my children, like they have a level of expertise now, because we've been doing this for this amount of time, and they like to like show it. And so to watch them like be empowered by these skills they've grown, and they feel like they can go and give to others, is really beautiful, and that keeps me going. And just the constant like reading, like Farming While Black was so inspirational to me, and especially because that came out like right after I did my immersion there. Like, so they were still taking some of the pictures. I'm in a few, but I'm like, I'm into the work, so you can't really see it's me, but I know it's me. So is those things where it's like it's texts that are contemporary, it's talking about the things that we're going through. And so knowing that these things exist, so that the Northeast Farmers of Color exists, you know, and that there's places we could go to for resources for us to continue to build the things we need to really sustain ourselves in this climate and in this era that we're living in. So those are some.
Yeah, absolutely. Like thinking about sort of the importance of subsistence and self-reliance and community all together. Chandra or Chris, do you want to add sort of what's been inspiring to you in your work?
Just to piggyback, because we are partners in the work. A part of that really inspires me is the reconnection of land and ancestry that comes up when we're teaching folks and having folks in our space, that ancestral call. And that's what I didn't do to start off. So calling in our ancestors who are with us every day and with us through the relearning of things that have been taken away from us is really inspiring to me, because we can reach back. It's the word Sankofa. We're reaching back, gleaning those lessons, and then living it and teaching it. And so that's really inspirational to me, to be a part of that work and to be a part of that continuum that's intergenerational, ancestral, and very much present. So yeah, that's what's keeping me inspired as of late.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a theme of kinship that we can kind of expand upon later. Chandra, did you want to share what's been inspiring to you?
Sure. All of that Kristen and Tonya said, and I think the most recent thing that is really inspiring me is the oldest story that we have in Haudenosaunee or Haudenosaunee culture, which is our creation story. So I probably first heard it about 30 years ago, but I'm revisiting it now as I'm doing my PhD work. So it's interesting to approach it after a whole whack of community work for a couple decades. And now I'm diving deeper into it and pulling out a lot of the food references, and just it's good reminders of the connection that we have to food that goes before the beginning of time as we know it on this planet. So for me, that is very inspiring. And then I would say on the opposite end of that is my children, and then thinking about future grandchildren, hopefully. So it's just this wide end of the spectrum from, connectedness through time and space, and then going back, and then through time and space going forward, looking towards the Dahadi Gunsunjunje, or what they call the faces coming at us out of the ground. Mm-hmm. So all of that is inspiring.
Yeah, I love that. I'm wondering if any of you want to say a little bit more about the connection that you see between climate justice and mothering or raising children, or thinking about the future inhabitants of this land.
I guess I'll go ahead because that is kind of like my entire life. But maybe briefly, because it's so present for me, because I do have 4 daughters and they range in ages from 22 to 6. So I've been doing the mothering thing for a ridiculously long time. So that is always a present theme in my life. So of course, we're always thinking about our future and thinking about our children's future, but also because, in Ganyageha, the word for earth, you don't really ever just say earth. You say Yetini Stohajio Punjade. You say she to us is our mother. You say our mother the earth. And the root word in there, Ohwanja, is really the same root for the word that we would say, which it means I need or I want something. So really, when we think about it, our Mother Earth provides us everything that we need. And if there are other things that we want/need in our life, we don't really need them unless they came from the earth. Like, they're nice, our phones and all those things, but really we don't need them unless they come from Yetini Stohajio Punjab, our mother, the earth. So so any talk about the environment is really always going to entail a talk about mothers and mothering and families. So environmental justice is very much tied to family and community justice.
Absolutely. Tonya, Noel, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, I would say that one of my favorite texts on this subject is Revolutionary Mothering, which was gifted to me from Chris. And this feature actually in the museum right now. And it goes into just like how mothering is like othering, you know, and it's like it encompasses everything and all of us. And we it like Chandra really just really wrapped it up so eloquently, so well, you know, how it gives us kind of everything we need. But it also, like, when we look at like the climate or whatever, it also like it tells us what's wrong, you know, and so it gives us the ability to fix it. And so what really comes to mind for me is when you think about like a sick baby and how like a mother's able, like, the milk, it can make milk specifically for like the sickness of the baby or whatever, and it's only something like that happens in that bond. And it's like that's us in the literally the world we live in, you know, like we can be so connected so that it tells us what's wrong. And it's on us as to be being like the stewards of the land and of this earth, to like really help heal those things. But it's super difficult, and especially for the mothers, because like we have so much on us in the world we live in, and it's like there's this giant pollution machine, you know, constantly like going against what we just trying to do, just trying to clean it up, just trying to make it right. And that's intersectional in itself, because that's in like every kind of avenue of life, really. But yeah, you just try to make it as best as you know, as the best you possibly can, and really like work on your personal environment, and the best, making the best environment for your children and the folks coming after you, even though it's super, you know, the climate shifting and all that.
Yeah. So I have another question that is kind of following up on this topic of intersectionality, which is, you know, this notion that different forms of repression are intersecting and sort of, we call them multiplicative instead of summative. So they are more than the sum of their parts. And so I'm wondering if you all could speak a little bit more about how you make your work inclusive and intersectional, whether that's taking into account gender and sexuality, ability, race, class, or other forms of experience, identity, and marginalization.
So we have a saying, and I'll just make it PG for this, that is intersectional or is BS. You can just fill that in. Because in our work, that's something that we challenge ourselves to do, is to ensure that like we're not just hitting one identifier box, but being intersectional. And so that word came out in '89. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw put that word out to describe how you could be woman and still experience different kinds of oppression if you are a Black woman or a white woman, or another kind of woman, so, or ethnicity of woman. And so taking that lens into the work that we do right now is looking at not only like cis women or women that we would see historically, but highlighting and identifying women that are on the margins, and like listening and centering their experiences and stories to make sure that that our work is intersectional, because it goes beyond just like, yes, we're Black, and like it's that and part, and it's connecting that, and then making sure that we are again challenging ourselves to meet that ask from our community.
Chandra?
Mm-hmm. This is a very interesting question for me, because my life, I think I was just born into intersectionality. So before I heard that word, I used to joke and say I'm like the walking diversity poster child because of many things in my life. However, as I've gotten older, when I started in this PhD program and we started with these words, you know, like intersectionality, and I had to think about that for a second. And I thought, well, that's just kind of who I am. But we all have to make a conscious effort sometimes, I think, depending on where we live, perhaps. So when I was living in Buffalo, I would say some of those things came a little more naturally. So it's an interesting question for me to think about right now, because I've been living on the territory for almost 20 years. And because I think that sometimes we are so focused on ourselves vis-a-vis dominant culture, that sometimes we lack a little bit of the inclusivity conversation, because we're always so wrapped up in against the dominant, against the dominant. So we always have struggles right now on the territory, like with the federal government, with the local and provincial governments, in terms of land claims, for example. So I feel like we get wrapped up in that a lot of times, so that it isn't always on the narrative necessarily, in terms of diversifying, because we're always walking around with a certain shield.
Mhm.
But when I come back to where I was raised in Buffalo, all of those intersectionalities come rushing back towards me. So for me, I guess it depends a little bit on where I am and what I'm focusing on at any given moment.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of the things that I think about a lot as an anthropologist who's interested in sort of belonging and placemaking, is the politics, like for myself, of being Black on Indigenous land. And so I'm wondering if you all could speak a bit sort of to how Black and Indigenous communities can create solidarity in their movements toward climate justice.
I would say I want to first answer your intersectionality
Oh,
question
yeah,
and
go ahead,
dive
Tonya.
into, what black folks could do on indigenous land. So I think like the garden on Flint and Jefferson like really highlights like intersectionality in so many ways, right? So it's in what folks would be considered the crescent or whatever, with like the violence or whatever, but then also the poverty rates are super high in that area, and then the lead rates are super high in that area. And then if we were to look at like an environmental justice map, the soil, the rates of like lead and those things being in the soil would be super high in those areas. So it's like if we lay all of these maps on each other for this intersection specifically, it like literally personifies, shows us exactly what intersectionality looks at, and that's like really where we find ourselves, and really that's where we really wanted to plant the seed for our work. Really to make sure we were like encompassing everyone, so it's like then we could work with this school that's right here that's actually serving these youth that live on this street, and whose grandma live on this street, so we can highlight the intergeneration, like because the all of these things have like intergenerational results, right? So we want to be able to like really like have a root cause analysis, and when we're trying to like solve a problem, because we're not solving a problem from like using the master tools, when we try to solve a problem, actually from the grassroots or whatnot. We want to, in a radical way, according to Angela Davis. So like really grasping it by the root. And so doing it in the way in which we have, where we can really like meet folks exactly where they are and exactly where the issues are, and we still miss things even in that, because like we didn't necessarily like we didn't necessarily have like a ramp or those sort of things, and that's still like on us to then be like, once folks bring it up, like be able to like fix those things, but it's in continuing to have conversations. And then that takes me into what it's like to be Black on Indigenous land, because we were doing all of this land work because just really working to address our personal traumas, as Black people on the land in America. And it wasn't until just really being in other spaces, one Soulfire, but then also being a part of some organizations in Buffalo and stuff, and were able to connect with, was it, I can't think of exactly we meet with a lot of people. It's really about, connecting. Um, and you really like are able to like hear stories of other folks, and put those things together, and then put yourself in a position so you can really like acknowledge the land that you're on and talk about it and grow. So in our last year on at Flint and Jefferson, before we're going back this year, we grew corn, and that was corn that we like got from folks because it was like so sacred, and it's like this is what we should be growing in this space, just as like tribute, just as respect for where we're growing this land at. the land we're growing on and what it represents.
Yeah, absolutely. Chandra, do you want to add something?
Sure. Yeah, I love this question. I've just thought about this so much for decades. A lot of things have gone by the wayside. I was talking to my husband about this recently. He's considerably older than I am, and so he remembers things like AIM, the American Indian Movement, Red Power movement, coinciding with the Black Power movement, and I kind of said, well, what happened to those things? Like, you can look back and you can see pictures of celebrity folks that had these alliances and these allegiances, and maybe we're not seeing that so much anymore. And so that would be a really wonderful thing, I think, to explore. I think people are doing it on a community level, but we're not seeing it as much out there. And I had an interesting experience talking to a friend of mine not too long ago, where she said, "What's a BIPOC?" And I said, "Oh, well, that's kind of a thing they're using." This was at home at Six Nations, which is surrounded by Canada. And she said, "What's a BIPOC?" I said, "Well, that's just kind of a term they're using now for things." She says, I don't want to be a BIPOC." So I had to kind of talk around that with her. And so I think that we can come together without being lumped together, and that we can we can still be distinct people. We can share as I believe that we're meant to. And so sometimes, we get caught up in that narrative. Again, this over culture saying, well, there's this, and then there's everybody else. So this BIPOC thing, it's kind of funny. So I really love this conversation about how we are coming together as distinct peoples, but in community and sharing our histories. The Haudenosaunee have a wampum belt, which describes the nature of the relationship between the Haudenosaunee and the Europeans, who was originally the Dutch. But in recent years, we've had to look at that and say, but where are African Americans on this? Where are all newcomers on this? Where are other people of color on this? Because this is what has happened, in the last few centuries. It's no longer, Indigenous and European, and it never was, of course, from the beginning. So this is a conversation that we have been having sometimes internally amongst the Haudenosaunee nations, is how are we expanding this to be inclusive of everybody else? Where is everybody else on this narrative?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that notion that we can come together without being lumped together. I feel like that's, yeah, I'm gonna remember that for sure. Kristen,
And I think that's how we reclaim the narrative from whiteness altogether, right? Because whiteness teach us assimilation, like go into the pot and all mix together. And what we know, connecting back to our ancestral roots, is like, no, you can have identity and yet work with your neighbors. And that is part of like the work all the time. There's an essay, Coalition Politics by Bernice Reagan Johnson, and I'll put it in the chat. But in that essay, she talks about the person who shows up at the climate justice meeting and the native land meeting and the school kids meeting and like all of these meetings. Like, we need to make sure that that person has support, because they're seeing the lens as wider than where they are. And that is like, that's our work. And it is like the internet, I thought, was going to make that smaller, you know what I'm saying? But like in real time, like there are borders, you know what I'm saying? There are ways that whiteness has come into our movements and into the work that we want to do, and said, we're going to put an X on this for whatever reason. And so then we have to be super inventive, right? To then do that work, to say, I'm going to a reservation, I'm going somewhere else, I'm going to go outside of where I'm located to meet other folks. Like, and it's risky, you know what I'm saying? But like, it's in that honesty and it's in that like pure desire to want to build a bridge that we actually start building those bridges. And so I think this conversation is one of those ways, right? Like, now I know where you live at. Sit, like, what's up? Like, when I know I can't go to Canada right now, I don't know if I can get to you right now, you know? But you know what I'm saying? But now I know about your work, right? And so now it's like, if I am traveling, which I will one day, I know that there's a stop somewhere north of here that somebody's doing this work. And it's knowing your neighbors, right? It's like knowing the folks in Buffalo, knowing the folks everywhere else. Like, because if things go left or right, I need to know who left or right, up or down. And it's in these movements that we find those folks. So very interesting way to keep going.
Yeah, and one of the things that I keep sort of like hearing underneath and then sometimes explicitly in what you've all been saying is this question of, you know, spatial dynamics or place. And so again, like related to the question of land and indigeneity and where we are, how is placemaking or space making or creating attachments to place or belonging related to climate justice and the work that you're doing?
Well, I just want to add to, I think what Tonya mentioned, you know, I had the privilege of a great time just before COVID, of coming back to Buffalo and doing a workshop with a group hosted by Rebecca Williams. And I think it was the first time that we did something in Buffalo with Black folks and Indigenous folks. Like, it was one of the first around food. And Leah Penniman, of course, was the keynote speaker later on in the evening. And so to me, food is always the way, or a way. It's not the only way, but it's like the best way, you know, to bring people together. So I think there is a direct relationship with food and this conversation around climate justice, because as we know, the current global food system is, you know, probably the #1 contributor to some environmental destruction, not just through the soil, but through all aspects of the environment. So there is a direct relationship there. So if we move ourselves backwards, not only as individuals and in our families, but in our communities, to putting some focus on food, whether it be through agriculture, through growing food, but hunting food, fishing food, gathering food, any way that we obtain food, even if it's supermarket shopping food, that food is one of the best ways, I think, is not only for us to have an environmental consciousness, which will lead us to the talk of climate justice, but also just the topic of community.
Absolutely. Tonya, Noel, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to add to this?
Yeah, I was literally trying to find the thing that Rebecca did, but it's not coming up right now.
Yeah, I forget what it was called, but it was a great time. We cooked food together, and that was the thing. That's what we did. We cooked food together in a giant kitchen, and it was fabulous.
Oh, it really is, and a lot of the work that's coming out of that space is really amazing. I would say, as far as like placemaking, being a part of what's happened in the climate movement with like that's led by like people of color in Western New York and in New York State is really amazing, especially because there's the normal climate movement, but it's harmful, right? So it does cause harm to like Black and brown bodies, even though like it's climate, you know, it's the earth, and it's like we all need this. Like, this is the thing we should all agree on for sure, because we live in the system we live in, because white supremacy is white supremacy. It still, you know, can cause harm. So to be a part specifically of like this like people of color led real movement happening here, we partnered with folks from like New York Renews and Push and like just Western New York organizers who just really wanted to see like real change and then create real spaces. And in that, I feel like I've learned so much. Really just like in the last 2 years, and it, again, because people are like committed to it, and see this place specifically as a place to grow and thrive and to grow together. And so we're just seeing more and more like orgs, like grassroots orgs really based around climate and food and like climate justice, food justice really come together. And yeah, what's happening in New York right now, and it's not even just New York, like the Northeast are just happening right now. Like, it's a real like movement of people committed to it, even though these systems can be super whatever these systems are, whatever tools they use, whatever given day. Like, I can't get all of the name, but whatever it is. So to make a place here, and then for us, it's also like ancestral again, understanding the Great Migration and just like how land specifically was never a thing for people of color here. And even when it was supposed to be, it was like taken away. So we see like farmland from farmers of color like dwindling over the last 100 years, and intentional acts by the U.S. government and by different parties to like make that happen. So now when we talk about like the Green New Deal and stuff like that, it's like being intentional and talking about reparations for these farmers, for these people who have been disconnected from the land, or just for people, you know, like Black people in general, who have been disconnected from the land, because that's really how we move this climate movement, right? We have to first talk about people's disconnect from like the earth and the land and why they don't want to like move this thing forward. So being in this space here that is like already historically a space for like abolition and all those things, so to be pushing that forward in this time is super amazing. So it's really fertile ground where we are, you know, and being on the lakes and all of that. I mean, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in this climate thing that's happening, you know. So I'm grateful for the space that my folks decided to come to, you know. So it's just continuing to build on the legacy of what's already happening here.
Yeah, beautifully stated on a snowy Earth Day in Rochester. Chris, I think I originally learned the word space making from you. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this sort of discussion about space and place.
Okay, so I'm gonna give honor to my mama for it, because it's through her work and ancestry that really made me start to question place and space anyways. Noel talked a little bit about the Great Migration, because I was like, Rochester cool and all, it just don't seem like I'm from here. And so like in doing that work, it just was about space making. Like, where did folks who were coming up north make space and place? And it was just really interesting to me to know that there were farmers down south that came up north and weren't farmers anymore, and then found another way. And so like in census records, going back and seeing like what they listed as their occupation, it's like, it's not that they didn't have skills that could make them money and sustain them. It's intentional acts that keep folks disconnected from the land. So yeah, that's like where I got it from. And I just love her so much for giving me that like little gem to keep going, because it just, you just ask one question and it's like a domino effect. Then you learn so much more. And then as of late, I learned that there was some like native roots, because I had never had that confirmed or anything like that until I talked to like my oldest living uncle. And he was like, no, your mother's like Seminole or something. And I was like, oh, I never knew that. Nobody ever told me. And so it's like in reconnecting and trying to highlight these stories, and then be like, actually, we are over here not on our own will. Right. And so then like really unpacking what connection to land really is. There was this book I read, it was and it said like the land not even ours, right? Like the land just the land, and we should honor and respect it. Like we shouldn't own it or anything like that. And that's again where whiteness come in, saying that you could split stuff into parcels, tear stuff down and make parking lots. And it's like, the land is so much more sacred than that. And so like just revisiting and going back to that is how I got to space making, because I'm not a owner of the land, you know, I'm just like inhabiting and taking a steward and space maker there.
Yeah. Adrienne Marie Brown uses the phrase joyful conduit, which I really like to think about this. This is why we need archivists, right, Chris? So I'm seeing that it's 7:53. I'm not sure if we have time for more of our discussion or if we should sort of open it up to questions, but I'll wait to hear from Perone. And I have sort of a question to that I think might be nice to sort of end this segment of the event on, which is, what has been nourishing to you all, particularly in this, last year? We hear so much about burnout and self-care, and this notion of care gets increasingly detached from its origins in people of color organizing and activism. And it's been co-opted and commodified by capitalism and optimization discourse, that like you need to take care of yourself so that you can be a more productive capitalist laborer. And so I'm wondering what practices you all engage in to rest and recharge for the fight. And I know that Chandra has a poem that she wants to share with us. And so maybe that can be our final word before we get into the Q&A with our guests.
I say committed to the fight because folks that's dependent on And I got to make it happen. And also, I just believe in another world is possible. And I know it is. And it's through collective action, the collective, and for the collective good that we can do it. And so I just continue to commit myself to that, because that's really the only option. And so that's really how I stay focused and stay in it.
Chris, do you want to share your self-care practice?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna give a tangible practice. I've been easing into my days, and I know everybody doesn't have that luxury, but like by ease into my day, I mean like I wake up when the sun wakes up so I can see the sun or the brightness, because the sun don't really shine here. I know that. And then I get in the bathtub and I spend a good time in the bathtub. And I'm in the bathtub, like I'm writing, I'm praying, I'm cleansing things off of me, but I'm also like taking my time. Like I am not being rushed out of the tub. And it's really, I would say for the past 4 months, been what has been grounding me and keeping me together, because I like mix different herbs and like make tea baths for my bath. And it's like a real good self-care practice, because then I'm like buying like the bombs for the bath, and then trying to have it a luxurious experience like the first thing in the morning, so that I'm moving through my day with that kind of ease. It doesn't always work out, but you know what? I'm in a better headspace when I get out of the bathtub. So that's a practice. Plus books all the time. Okay.
Yeah, I recently rediscovered the joy of a hot bath. I highly recommend for those who are able. Chandra, do you want to kind of?
I wonder, Perone, is it possible to quickly put up those images? Because I think they're visually nourishing, and they are also what has been nourishing me. So, okay, so Gakpa Umwe, that's my real people eat real food. The revolution will be delicious. This is one way I've been nourishing myself as I tried to get back into some of my artwork and creativity. And this is a piece that I used with a body cast from one of my pregnancies. And you can see the corn fabric in the background. And I won't give it away too much, but there's this gold paint and these crystals that look like diamonds and wampum strings coming from the belly, from the lifeline. And so for me, this is one of the ways that I'm nourishing myself by reminding myself of the creation story and just things that are precious to me and precious to us, compared to the gold and the diamonds that were perhaps precious to other people. That was just a close-up so you could see the corn in there. You can go ahead quickly, Perone. I don't want to take too much time. This was the piece that was in the Rochester show, another picture of mothering. This is the corn. So Tonya mentioned corn. This is one of our heirloom ancestral corn. So when I talk about corn from the creation story, this is what I think of. Next. This is the process of nixtamalizing, though we just call it lying corn because we don't use limestone, we use hardwood ash. When you put that white corn in those ashes, it turns that color. That's how you know it's working. And this is rinsing off the corn, the ashes off the corn in a specially made corn washing basket, a splint basket. Go ahead, next. This is cooking cornbread, boiled cornbread from that corn after doing that process. And to me, this is, one of our consummate Haudenosaunee foods. It's so nourishing. I like to say that it heals past lives. This is a corn mush made from a blue flint corn that has some wild blueberries and some maple syrup. And to me, that is very cosmic looking, which reminds me of the universe and in our creation story.
Those are beautiful. Did you want to share
some nourishing things?
Did you want to share your poem with us before we get
I would love to, if that's okay.
Guest questions? Yeah.
Okay. This is something I wrote last year. This is called Eat the Love. To be real people, we humans have a need to feed our bodies regularly, to keep our spacesuits clean and functioning well as they house our true nature, that place within us that comes from another and will one day take its place among the stars. illumination, solace. Know that when we talk about food, we are just talking about life. When we take in that which we call food, we are taking in the forces of our cosmic family. Eat the love. It could have been different. We could fill up at stations like gasoline for fuel, stick a nozzle in our belly button to recharge our batteries. Instead, we get to gather and pick and chop and slice and sip and share and husk and grind and stir in anticipation and savor. This is our inheritance. This is our birthright. So little asked in return. Dance, sing, enjoy, repeat. So before we begin to talk about food matters, issues, and concerns, I acknowledge you as an eater, one who chooses life with every spoonful.
I feel so nourished.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I do have a question here from one of our guests, participants, attendees. It's a multi-part question sort of about art and climate justice. So I'm just going to read the question. It says, I've read opinions from some climate justice activists that in order to address the climate crises we are facing, we need artists to participate and help to make the case. Do you think that's true? Is there something you wish that artists could communicate or a narrative you wish artists could help to share?
It's like cue that Nina Simone quote. It's like the artist's job. It's all of our job to talk about the issues, right? So the more the better, I think. That's all. I would cue the Nina Simone quote. It didn't pop up on my phone fast enough. So
You could put it in the chat. Chris, did you want to add something?
Hold on, say the question one more time. I really feel like I'm losing my. Okay, what's the question?
I think it's a April 2021 sort of symptom.
Yeah, it just like went away. Like,
yeah.
That
So.
quick. Oh, I was saying intersectionality. That's what I was saying. I was going back to intersectionality. I was going to say that yes, art has a place, just like wherever discipline you come from has a place in climate justice and racial justice and reproductive rights and reproductive justice. Like anywhere you sit, it doesn't matter where you are. And so like that's a challenge for folks. It's like to see at your discipline where an intersection could be made, right? And who's missing from the table, who needs to be at the table, who's not there. So yeah, I do think that artists of all types and kinds, and folks that don't identify as artists, like we all have a place in this work, and to show the intersections, like how it goes together. Like, can we honestly talk about reproductive justice without talking about climate justice? Not really. Or we're not going to go as far in one conversation or both conversations, right? Because we're not looking at it together. And that's another like nod from like the divine feminine, right? Like we are the bearers, right? Like we can do all things, but then also like knowing that we as vessels can be the healing, no matter what. Like I would just say tap into that part, if nothing else. Like who's the caretaker, and who's doing that kind of care work is kind of where I kind of start. Like who's taking care of the children, like whatever discipline you can investigate that for yourself.
Yeah. Chandra, you showed us some of your art. Do you want to sort of elaborate on the role that art plays in climate justice movements and artists?
Yeah, I think first it helps to define what is art. So if you're limiting in your definition of what art is, you might not see the connection. But in the examples of the artwork that I did, or in poetry or in music, when you open yourself up to the arts, then you open yourself up to seeing the intersectionalities, as Chris mentioned. So for me, the arts always has a place, regardless of what the issue is. But then there's the art of the social. There's the art of mothering, So there's all of these artistic ways of being if you expand your mind and expand your definition. But I think throughout time in history, you know, artists have always brought issues to the forefront, and a lot of times much more poignantly and eloquently than, say, politicians. So there's always going to be a place for the artists. And if you can recognize the artist in yourself and, you know, hone in on some of your own creativity, then that will help to expand that definition as well of who and what an artist is.
Yeah, absolutely. In anthropology, we talk about the art of being human. I really like that phrasing. So I think it's about time to wrap up. There's another kind of final like two-part question that I think will be nice to end on, which is, are there specific local efforts, organizations, or individuals that you want to take this opportunity to elevate and amplify before we go? And then how can interested folks get involved with your work and broader local efforts? So sort of some action items.
So I put our information in the chat already, and I'll put it again so that it's lower down. You can find us on the internet, the World Wide Webs. We have websites for our endeavors there, but a lot of our like day-to-day kind of stuff is on social media. So if you're on Facebook or Instagram, you'll get a more personal look at the work that goes on and what happens every day. So those projects specifically are Flower City Noire Collective, and in that we have a mentoring program, a Black gardening program, with 2 gardens this year, the Jeff Sun Garden and the Flint and Jeff Garden. We're returning there. That's a mentorship already. Oh, and then we do like we're doing a bookstore. And so then that website, I don't know what's going on, y'all. Like it's really, I need a vitamin and a nap. So yeah, the Noir Reading Room is set to open by June, but you can support us online before our physical space opens, and the information is also in the chat there, and that's what we're working on right now.
I want to uplift us. We've been doing this environmental justice work, going super hard, and it's like sometimes you don't give yourself flowers or whatever, but being in the museum is really like helped to give me like context to be like, you know what? I'm proud of you. So yes, I think we've been doing a great job. Yeah, just like our like comrades in this work. So of course Rebecca Williams, who we were just talking about, in Food for the Spirit. I couldn't think of the name of it, but I put it in the chat as well. Soulfire Farm and the amazing work they doing, and just the literature that folks are putting out. So check that out. And if you need those books, you know, you can get them from us. And I'm super excited about the garden season, being back on Flint and Jefferson. I want to say it is May 15th, but to be exact, if you check out our Facebook page or our Instagram page, it has the actual like events. So you can, or our event calendar, that's somewhere. So you can check out any of those things. Yeah, and I'm just super grateful to be in this space. I'm going to continue to do this work and continue to plant seeds. And I just want, all my New York Renews friends, actually, those guys are also great. I'm not sure if they do just do great work, and they really like making sure like these things get passed to like make it happen, and really like putting Black and brown folks in the forefront of doing it. And I'm super excited, and I'm thankful to be you know, working with those folks. So I just want to uplift those people and
go Geo. I'm shouting out Geo, her name.
Oh yeah, Geo specifically, out of Buffalo, and just all the Buffalo fam, really, because I love them so much. That's
all. I guess I'll add a few in the Rochester area. Victor area would be Ganondagan, the Ganondagan State Historic Site, which is, you know, a site of an old Seneca village site, the Waga village. So you can visit the center there as well as the Seneca Museum there. Here in Buffalo, you know, anything Rebecca Williams would be doing. I actually met her long before, you know, before I left Buffalo, when I was doing a community garden at where I worked at Native American Community Services Center. What else? And out at Cattaraugus would be Gakuyo Farm. You can check them out. They're doing some wonderful things with Haudenosaunee foods. Gakuyo Farm.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much.
And these ladies,
Go ahead.
fun for me.
Chris put it in the chat,
The
but I
young,
couldn't let this in.
young men.
Sorry.
This is
Pam
so
Reese-
exciting.
No, I'm so excited. I could not mention Pam Reese Smith because like is doing garden work in the city. Like she lays so much groundwork and has created so many spaces and gardens for us to learn, and is still doing so much. And she's so rooted in the work she does. A great mentor. And so to not mention her would just be beyond me. So shout out to Pam Reese Smith and all of them.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Like, thank you so much for these action items, for these suggestions, for these resources, for these connections. I guess I will pass it back to Perone, who I think is going to close us out for tonight.
I am. This hour.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate. Also, great facilitator, great supporter, great doctor. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead, Dr. Meredith.
Let's give some love to everyone here in the chat. This conversation, this hour just flew by, and I just want to be your friend and hang out with you. This was just really a nourishing treat, and was precisely what I needed today. So speaking very selfishly, I'm so thankful to all of you. Go ahead and give them some love in the chat, my friends. Give them their flowers. If you haven't spent an afternoon at the Rochester Museum and Science Center to check out the Changemakers exhibit, you have until May 16th, and I strongly, strongly encourage you to do so. It is an incredibly inspiring and beautiful exhibit. And if you enjoyed tonight's conversation, we have one more coming up in the Amplify series on Wednesday, April 28th. That's next Wednesday. We'll have Rachel de Guzman, Wanda Martinez, John Cox, and Sadie Fisher in a conversation about anti-racism and inclusion, moderated by Dr. Irma McLaurin. That's it for tonight, my friends. Once again, thank you, Chandra, Kristen, Tonya, Noel, and Kate, for sharing your perspectives, your insight, your souls with us, your beautiful work. And I hope you'll all check out all of the wonderful resources that they shared, both locally and nationally. Stay safe and have a great night.